I never thought sound could hurt, but what I heard in that vision wasn't music, it was a lament disguised as a melody. It wasn't a dream or a figment of my imagination, it was a revelation. I was taken to the place where sound carries weight, where every note is a memory and every voice a condemnation. There I understood that even in hell there are songs, but none of them are joyful, and among them all was one that repeated endlessly, a song composed by Michael Jackson, the idol the world still venerates without knowing what his soul sings now. Before continuing, write your name and country in the comments. I want to pray for you, for your family, and for everyone who has been seduced by fame, music, or the allure of the world. This testimony doesn't seek to judge, but to warn, because what I saw that night wasn't entertainment, it was the factory of cursed sounds. It all began during a vigil. I was praying, asking for discernment about the hidden power behind music. I felt a strange weight in the air, as if the air itself were vibrating with an invisible rhythm. I closed my eyes and asked the spirit to show me the truth. Suddenly, the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I found myself descending into an abyss shrouded in red mist, where the sound came not from instruments, but from screams. It was as if each lament formed a note and each moan composed an unbearable melody. The spirit spoke to me, "Listen carefully, for this is the music the world ignores." In the distance, I saw lights flickering like an inverted stage. Thousands of figures moved among shadows, repeating the same steps, the same gestures, like artists trapped in an endless concert. Each one seemed to be performing their own sin, a choreography of eternal guilt. In the center of the stage was a throne made of giant speakers. From them came a familiar voice. It was soft, melodic, unmistakable. "Michael," I whispered, unable to believe what I was hearing. His figure appeared through the smoke, thin, dressed in white, his face covered in tears that fell like liquid fire. His eyes no longer reflected fame or pride, only despair. "There's no applause here," said a voice behind me. It was the spirit. Only echoes of what once was. The infernal crowd screamed his name, but not with admiration. They shouted it as an accusation. Each scream was a voice dragging him deeper. "You taught us," they said. "You opened the door." Then I understood that music has spiritual power, that it can open portals of both light and darkness. I saw how the notes of his songs transformed into chains that ensnared other musicians, other dreamers, thousands of young people who idolized his image. Michael raised his trembling hands. "I just wanted love," he said, his voice breaking, but black sparks flew from his hands, as if every attempt to touch the sky had turned into a fallen spark. Around him, demons in the form of dancers spun endlessly, marking the rhythm with synchronized steps. Each movement produced a sound, an infernal percussion. The melody they played was beautiful and painful at the same time, as if beauty itself had been corrupted. The spirit made me listen closely. "Do you hear that?" it asked. It was a song, but it didn't exist on earth. Each note was a sigh, each chorus a lament. It was as if Michael's voice mingled with thousands of souls singing in different tones of pain. There were no lyrics, but I could understand every word. It said, "I had everything and lost eternity." The spirit spoke again. "This is the song he composed after death. It is the reflection of his soul. On earth he sang of love, peace, and unity, but here he sings of loneliness, guilt, and emptiness." I then saw a table of burnt gold before him. On it, a parchment burned slowly. It was a score written with fire. Each line, the spirit said, represents a life influenced by his music, some for good, others for damnation. Michael wept, pounding the floor. He didn't want this, he just wanted to be loved. He cried, but the floor responded with an echo, love without truth, self-worship. The demons laughed. One of them, with the face of a music producer, pushed him toward the throne. "Keep singing," he said. "The audience must not be silent." And with a macabre smile, he tapped out the rhythm with an iron cane. The music started again, louder, more heart-wrenching. I saw the souls around me sway to the lament. Some wept, others covered their ears, but none could stop listening. Hell has its anthems, the spirit told me, and this is one of the most powerful. because it is made with what the world calls art. Every sound was an inverted prayer, every harmony a mockery of heaven, and I understood that talent without divine purpose becomes an eternal curse. Suddenly, the fire changed color. It turned blue, cold, like a dull neon light. Michael's voice began to break, his singing transformed into a scream. "Stop this, please," he begged, but a gigantic figure emerged from behind the stage. It was him, dressed in a gleaming black suit, with a smile that belonged to no human. "The show isn't over," he said mockingly. "The world still sings your lyrics, and every time they do, you begin again." The spirit touched my shoulder. "Look and learn. This is the truth behind idolatry. What the world applauds, hell prolongs." And at that moment, the lights went out. Only her voice remained, floating among the flames. It was a sustained, endless note, as if all of hell breathed through it. It was the lament of a soul that had everything but redemption. I awoke drenched in sweat, my heart racing, but that melody kept playing in my mind, soft and sad, like a warning disguised as a song. I understood that hell has its own music and that every rhythm in the world can be a spiritual gateway if it doesn't bear the seal of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit took my hand and led me beyond the burning stage. Each step I took sounded like a drumbeat in the distance. The flames moved to the rhythm of the echoes echoed, and each falling spark formed a note. All of hell seemed to vibrate at the same frequency, as if it were alive, breathing music. "The melody of the abyss," the Spirit said, "is worship without truth. It sounds beautiful, but it is empty or purpose." We crossed a corridor made of broken mirrors. In each fragment, I saw familiar faces, artists, producers, singers. Some were crying, others were still composing, unaware that they were no longer on earth. "This place," the Spirit said, "is the Hall of Fallen Idols. Here, the souls who used their talent for their own glory compose eternally for those they thought they didn't know." The air was thick. We heard guitars weeping, drums beating like sick hearts, voices mingled with sighs. I saw a man playing a piano with bloodied hands. His face seemed familiar, but the Spirit wouldn't let me say his name. "Don't say who they are," it told me. "You are not here to judge, but to understand." In the center of the room stood an enormous organ built from skulls. Each key produced a sound that shook the floor. Before it, Michael continued singing, but his voice was no longer his own. It was as if something possessed it, modulating it, distorting it. "He doesn't steal talent," the Spirit explained. "He recycles it, transforms it into his most effective tool, the sound that seduces." I looked around and saw some demons taking notes, others adjusting instruments, others tuning strings made of human nerves. It was a hellish recording studio, but here the songs weren't heard on records, but in minds. Every musical idea inspired by vanity, every rhythm created to provoke sin, originates here, the Spirit told me. Hell also has composers, but none of them know harmony. In a corner, a female figure wept as she wrote on a parchment that burned without being consumed. She wrote about love, the Spirit said, but she didn't know true love. Hell makes her repeat every word she used to deceive others. Her tears turned to ink, and each phrase was another chain binding her soul. I saw the demons take those words and hurl them to the earth, where they transformed into modern, catchy, irresistible songs. Every soulless hit continued the Spirit. "It's an echo of this place." Suddenly, silence fell. A gigantic figure appeared at the back of the room. It was the same one, wearing a cloak made of melted gold records and fused trophies. He walked slowly, observing his condemned musicians. "They still work for me," he said with a smile. "The audience doesn't know that applause is an offering. Every time they sing your lyrics on earth, a flame is lit here." Michael looked up, exhausted. "I don't want to go on," he murmured. "Let me rest." He leaned toward him. "Rest when the world forgets your name. As long as they remember it, you will sing." His words were like whips. Michael screamed, but his voice became a note. Each scream was part of the song. I understood then that hell doesn't need instruments, it needs memory. While the world replays the past, hell relives it. The Spirit showed me a vision within the vision. I saw packed stadiums, lights blazing, crowds dancing. "They think they're celebrating art," the Spirit said, "but they're just repeating rituals. In every concert, every festival, every headphone, there's an invisible battle for the soul of the listener. Sound can open portals, he explained. What enters through the ear stays in the soul. The figure began to conduct with his hands like an orchestra conductor. Each demon played his instrument with precision. "This is my choir," said the choir of the fallen redeemed. "They belong to me because they sought eternal glory on earth and obtained it for an instant." With each movement, the hall vibrated. The walls filled with singing faces. It was a symphony of pain. The walls filled with singing faces. It was a symphony of pain. I saw Michael close his eyes. From his mouth came one last soft, almost heavenly melody. For a moment I thought he was praying, but the Spirit corrected me. He wasn't praying, remember. He was singing what could have been. The notes were so pure that the demons stopped. He frowned. "Don't sing that," he commanded, but it was too late. The melody rose like a white flame in the midst of the dark fire. The Spirit told me, that note doesn't come from hell, it comes from your repentance. Even here, the soul remembers its origin. Purity is never forgotten, it's only stifled. For a moment, the fire around us stopped and silence reigned. The Furious One struck the floor with his cane, shattering the calm. "Enough, don't challenge me with memories of heaven," he roared, and the entire hall shook. The mirrors began to break one by one, releasing dark smoke. From that smoke came the cries of other artists begging for forgiveness, pleading for a second chance. "Hell doesn't grant second chances," said the Spirit. "That's why there's still time for those who live." I looked at the Spirit with tears in my eyes. "And what should I do about this?" I asked. "Warn them," he replied. "Tell them that fame doesn't save. Tell them that not all inspiration comes from God. Tell them that talent without a holy purpose is a trap. And above all, tell them that hell sings, but heaven worships." The vision began to fade, but before I awoke, the Spirit let me hear one last thing. It was the same melody as Michael's, but now transformed. It was no longer a lament, it was a plea. It sounded like a child begging to go home. "Sometimes," the Spirit said, "even hell produces notes of longing for heaven, but those notes don't set you free, they only remind you of what's been lost." I awoke with the sound still ringing in my ears. It wasn't a human song, it was the echo of a repentant soul, caught between fire and memory, and I knew then that the greatest talent in the world is worthless if it doesn't end in adoration. I woke up gasping, my ears ringing. The room was dark, but I could still hear that melody floating in the air as if hell had tattooed it on my mind. I got up, staggering, and looked for a Bible. I opened it without looking, and my eyes fell on a verse from the prophet Ezekiel. "You fell because of the multitude of your hires. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty." I felt a chill. The Spirit spoke to me in silence. "Art without obedience repeats the mistake of the first one who fell." Days passed, and the song didn't disappear. Sometimes I heard it in dreams, other times in the noise of the street, in cars, even in people's headphones. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I understood that it wasn't an external sound, but a spiritual vibration. That melody seeped into the earth. The Spirit told me, the world reinterprets it again and again without knowing its origin. The lament of hell became inspiration. I turned on the television. A new music video was trending. Lights, fire, choreography, lyrics that spoke of distorted love, of glory and damnation. I recognized the structure, the notes, the gestures. It wasn't the same, but its soul was the same. "It's a copy," whispered the Spirit. "The echo of the abyss disguised as modern art." They don't hear the lament, they hear rhythm. They don't feel condemnation, they feel pleasure. I spent hours watching videos, listening to lyrics, analyzing sounds. Everything was connected, the same pulse, the same cadence, the same atmosphere. It was as if an invisible net linked each song to a common source. "Satan doesn't create," said the Spirit, "he only corrupts. What began in heaven as worship he turned into entertainment." I saw how the entire industry was like a river that flowed downstream, dragging talent, fame, and vanity along in one single current. One night, while I was praying, the Spirit took me again. This time I wasn't taken to hell, but to a studio on earth. There were people working, mixing sounds, composing lyrics, but in the corner of the room there was an almost invisible shadow moving its fingers over the controls. Every time it touched a knob, the atmosphere changed, the voices sounded more provocative, the rhythms more hypnotic. "He's there," the spirit said, "not with fire, but frequently." I saw a young producer raise his head wearily. "I don't know why, but I feel like this song already existed," his colleague said. He replied, "It doesn't matter, it sounds good." The spirit whispered to me, "Don't you know you're rewriting the melody of hell? What is art to you, is worship to the enemy." And I understood something terrifying. He doesn't need explicit lyrics, rhythm is enough for him because the body obeys what the soul cannot discern. I understood something terrifying. The Knower spoke, "Girls," he understood, among the chords, among the voices, among the effects, was the distorted, accelerated melody, but it was the same, Michael's song, the one from hell, the one that sounded like a lament. The enemy spread it, the spirit said, disguised it as fashion, mixed it with desire, and called it success. The spirit then showed me a vision within the earth, multitudes dancing, thousands of bodies moving to the same beat, but as they danced, something rose from the ground, a thick, black fog that rose to the ceiling and then descended upon them like a net. "What you feel is not energy," the spirit said, "it is absorption. Every time you celebrate without discernment, you feed the echo of the abyss." Some fell to the ground exhausted, weeping without knowing why, others smiled with empty eyes. "You are possessed by the frequency of desire," the voice said. "It is the language of hell, sound without a soul, beauty without purpose." Then I saw a small child in front of a screen, imitating dance steps. He didn't know what he was doing, he was just repeating them. Each movement seemed to stir something in the air. "This is how the cycle continues," the spirit said. "From innocence, the enemy plants the seed." I saw a translucent figure appear behind the child, mimicking his gesture, smiling with satisfaction. It was a spirit. "Idolatry no longer needs statues," the spirit told me, "only digital idols." The streets filled with screens, each displaying different faces, but behind everyone, the same note could be heard, the note, the lament. "Hell has a choir, and the world calls it a trend," the spirit said. I saw how concerts became rituals, the screams of the audience were unconscious prayers, the lights formed symbols, and the applause was a pact. "Not all who sing are free," the voice said, "and not all who applaud are innocent." The vision changed. I saw churches, some sang with power and light, but in others, the spirit wept. "Look," it told me, "at the altars, some groups played supposedly Christian songs, but the atmosphere was the same as the world. They have exchanged worship for spectacle," the spirit said. "They have confused presence with production. They sing his name, but with the notes of hell." The sound of Michael reappeared, but now mixed with a heavenly choir. It was as if two worlds were clashing over the same frequency. "The enemy wants sound," the spirit explained, "because sound governs the environment. If it controls the environment, it controls thought, and if it controls thought, it dominates the soul." Then I saw one last scene, an elderly woman in a simple house singing an ancient hymn. She had no microphone, no lights, no audience, only her trembling, yet pure voice. In heaven, that note expanded like golden fire. "This," the spirit said, "still moves me. True worship needs no stage, only intention." The melody of hell faded a little. For the first time in the vision, I felt peace. "Then there is still hope," I said. "Yes," the spirit replied, "as long as there are those who sing out of love and not for applause. The wail of hell cannot silence the voice of heaven." I awoke with tears in my eyes. I understood that hell does not destroy art, it copies it, that every time a pure heart sings, the echo of the abyss recedes, but every time a soul seeks fame, instead of purpose, Michael's lament echoes again. That night, as I prayed for understanding, the atmosphere shifted, the air grew thick, almost liquid. The shadows seemed to move, even though the room was closed. Then I felt it again, the same distant rhythm, the same frequency I had heard in hell. It was as if the echo had followed me here. I closed my eyes and cried out, "Holy Spirit, protect me." But before I finished the prayer, a voice answered, not from heaven, but from the ground. Why do you fear me, and why do I only show you what you love? I opened my eyes, and there he was, not a figure with horns and a tail, but something infinitely more subtle, an elegant man, dressed in black, with a tilted hat and a cold gleam in his eyes. His voice sounded like a melodic whisper, so harmonious that each word seemed like a note. "I am not your enemy," he said, smiling. "I am the producer of everything the world loves." The spirit within me trembled. I didn't listen to its harmony. He warned me, it's the disguise of his lie. But the figure continued speaking calmly, slowly circling the room. "Why do you blame Michael?" he asked. "He only wanted perfection, he wanted love, he wanted to transcend. I only offered him an eternal stage, a stage in hell," I replied. The man's smile widened. "And what difference does it make? Heaven applauds for a moment and forgets, the world applauds forever. I merely fulfill the desires of your hearts." He walked toward me, and I could feel each step vibrating with sound. It wasn't footsteps, it was percussion. "You call sacrifice worship," he said. "I call it art. You do it out of faith, I do it out of beauty." "The spirit," he told me, "is revealing its strategy. Listen, but don't give in." "Why music?" I asked. His face turned serious. "Because it's the only way to enter without permission," he said. "You don't need to open the door to let a sound in. The ear has no lock." Then he came closer, and I could see that his face didn't have a single shape. It was constantly changing. Sometimes he looked like an artist, sometimes a businessman, sometimes a producer. "I was there when they composed the songs that move the world," he said proudly. "I was the one who inspired the anthems of the revolution, the songs of desire, the sighs disguised as love. Sound is my language. I use it so that the flesh may worship without realizing it." His voice turned grave. "And Michael, Michael was my masterpiece." He said it with pleasure, like a sculptor speaking of his creation. "I took his innocence, wrapped it in talent, and then mixed it with loneliness. I gave him rhythm, I gave him fame, I gave him applause, and when he no longer needed love, I turned him into a myth. Now, even in death, he still sings for me." The spirit spoke with authority. "You lie. God did not create music for vanity, but for worship." The man laughed. "Oh, but worship is the same, only the recipient changes." He looked me straight in the eyes. "As long as there is someone who sings to be loved, he sings for me. It doesn't matter if he says the name of God, as long as his heart still desires applause." The atmosphere grew denser. Behind him, shadows began to appear, figures of artists, idols, singers, each with a dim light in the chest. "They belong to me," the man said, "because they mistook inspiration for salvation." One of the figures stepped forward, weeping. "It was Michael." "I didn't know," he murmured, but the man interrupted him with a gesture. "Your new people adored you, and that was enough for you." The spirit spoke again. "Release his soul." But the man turned slowly. "Release him. I don't have to hold him back. As long as his voice continues to resonate on earth, he will remain here." He extended his hand, and waves of sound surged from the air. Within them, I could see fragments of concerts, dances, crowds. "Every time they play his music, he revives my melody," he said with satisfaction. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. The spirit then raised a word within me, "Jesus." It was barely a whisper, but it was enough. The figure took a step back as if an invisible force had pushed him. "Ah, the name," he said with disgust, "the one sound I can't tune." The atmosphere began to tremble, the shadow of the performers distorted. Screaming, Michael fell to his knees, covering his ears. "Stop that name," the man pleaded. "You're ruining the symphony." But the spirit roared within me, "It's not a symphony, it's slavery. What you call art is lament, what you call rhythm is a chain." The man's face shattered, revealing for a second his true form, a dark void, faceless, without identity. It was pure sound, perverse vibration. "I exist as long as you applaud," he shouted, "and I will die when silence reigns." With a roar, he dissolved into a whirlwind of echoes that blasted off the walls. The spirit held me. "That was the Prince of Sound," he said. "His kingdom is not in fire, but in frequency. He has deceived generations into believing that music is neutral, but every note serves a throne. that of heaven or that of the abyss. I looked around. The room was silent, no noise, not even my breathing, and then I understood. Silence is also worship when it is filled with presence. The Spirit spoke once more. The enemy does not fear the noise of the world, he fears the silence of the believer. That night I understood that the war isn't between styles or genres, but between purposes. Michael's melody keeps playing because the world doesn't want silence, but every time someone turns off the music that feeds their flesh and raises their voice to heaven, a string of hell snaps. I knelt. Trembling, I knew I had seen too much, but the Spirit gave me one last warning. Don't attack the music, redeem it. Don't condemn the artist, pray for their echoes, because even in hell, the repentance of one soul can become an instrument of salvation for the living. And as those words echoed, I heard the melody again, but this time it was different. It was no longer a lament, it was a gentle plea, as if Michael, from somewhere beyond time, was singing what he never could in life. Jesus, take my voice. For days, my mind was a field of echoes. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that unfinished melody. Hell had composed it, but heaven wouldn't let it die. It was as if the sound sought new bodies to resonate in, new mouths to repeat its message disguised as art. In every city I visited, I heard fragments, in cars, in headphones, in temples. The song had mutated, multiplied, become omnipresent. The Spirit showed me that sound doesn't need religion to preach. A well-placed emotion is enough. One early morning, while fasting and searching for answers, the vision opened again. This time I didn't see fire, but a large studio suspended in the void. There were no walls or ceiling, only a liquid penumbra that vibrated to the rhythm of the music. There, thousands of souls worked tirelessly, composing, mixing, producing. They seemed inspired, but their eyes lacked sparkle. Their movements were mechanical, as if each note were slowly devouring them. This, the Spirit said, is the enemy's invisible workshop. Here are created the anthems the world calls hits. I walked among them. I saw lyrics written with smoke, melodies generated by machine, human faces singing soullessly. In the center of the studio, a throne of black glass. Upon it, a figure clothed in false light, identical to the idols the world acclaims. It wasn't Satan, it was his projection, a youthful-looking, charismatic demon who spoke with a seductive voice. I am the spirit of modern inspiration, he said. Humans call me Muse, but I am the echo of the first one who sang against God. The Spirit allowed me to hear his conversation with the damned. Do not compose with pain, the demon said, compose with desire. Don't speak of redemption, speak of pleasure. Don't invoke heaven, invoke attention. Everything you want, you will have, as long as you sing it with an empty heart. Each word fell like a metronome. The musicians obeyed without thinking. The melodies poured forth en masse, one after another, directed toward the earth. Each song had a destination, a designated victim. I saw one of those melodies pierce the air and reach a young producer's room. He didn't know what he was doing. He thought it was his own idea, but what he was composing was the exact translation of a lament from hell. That's how it spreads, the Spirit said. The enemy doesn't impose, he inspires. He doesn't force, he seduces. And I understood that true modern slavery isn't in chains, but in influence. Suddenly, a dark presence descended upon the studio. It wasn't noise or shadow, it was a distortion, like a frequency too low to be human. The whole place trembled. The musicians stopped playing. He's coming, they whispered, and then Satan appeared, dressed in the same robe made of molten gold he had seen before. But now his face was covered by a translucent veil. In his hand he carried an open book, identical to the digital one he had shown in hell, but with a new title burned into it, The Gospel of Sound. Listen to my prophets of noise, he said in a voice of thunder. Music was the language of heaven, but I took it and turned it into a net. Each generation surrenders to me faster than the last. I don't need to chase them, just keep them busy. He walked around the studio observing the souls composing. They think they are creating, he added, but they are only translating my whispers. Then he raised his hand and commanded, play Michael's Lament. From the corner, a group of shadows emerged. They played a distorted melody, and the entire room was filled with a high-pitched, unbearable sound. I saw souls crumble, as if the sound undid them. Every time his songs are sung on earth, he cried, the covenant is renewed, there is no need for blood when there is applause. The spirit pushed me forward. Look, he said. I saw screens hanging over the void, showing live artists, some were in concert, others recording, others giving interviews, but behind their voices, the same chord, the same frequency, could be heard. The echo of hell disguised itself as innovation, the spirit said, and millions connect without knowing they are participating in an invisible liturgy. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. On one of the screens, a recognizable singer was crying behind the scenes, saying, I don't know why I feel so empty, I don't even enjoy singing, and behind him, the shadow of the demon producer whispered, sing. Don't feel, the spirit spoke with a firm tone. It's not about fame, it's about purpose. Everything that doesn't come from the spirit ends up serving the enemy. Then the studio lights began to flicker. He turned and saw me again. You, said the preacher of silence, don't you get tired of interrupting my symphony? I didn't come to interrupt, I replied. I came to remind you that not all the notes are yours. He smiled, moving closer. Oh, of course they are, he said. Modern man doesn't sing to heaven, he sings to himself, and he who sings to himself serves me without knowing it. The atmosphere became unbearable. Every word of his was a vibration that coursed through my body. The screens vibrated, the musicians shouted. The shadows stretched. Tell me, he said, what will you do when the whole world worships the sound? When every church wants to hear what pleases and not what transforms, when even your own dance to the rhythm of my masterpiece, the spirit whispered to me, don't answer with words, answer with truth. Then I raised my hands and uttered a verse, may his name be exalted above all melody. The air was cut, the frequencies stopped. He stepped back, covering his face. Don't invoke that here, he shouted, but the studio began to fracture like glass. The screens shattered one after another, and from their cracks emerged a white light. The spirit spoke with authority. The sound of true worship disintegrates the echo of the abyss. And then I saw him. The souls who composed began to awaken. Some fell to their knees, others vanished like released smoke. The roar of fury erupted. I can't save them all, he said. The world keeps playing my songs, but the spirit replied, I don't need millions, I need one who listens with their soul. The studio collapsed. Everything went dark and silent, but within that silence I heard a distant voice again. It was Michael whispering from the depths, tell them not to sing aimlessly, that every clap hurts. His voice faded amidst echoes of fire and tears, and I understood that this vision was not over, the judgment was still to come. The verdict of the sounds, the war between the echo of hell and the melody of heaven was just beginning. I was snatched from that ruined studio and taken to a place unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was an amphitheater suspended between light and darkness, as if heaven and hell shared the same ground, separated only by a line of fire that vibrated at the center. This, said the spirit, is the courtroom of sound. Here, it is not notes that I judged, but intentions, not melodies, but motives. Before me stood two thrones, one made of molten gold from broken instruments, the other of transparent crystal radiating an unbearable purity. Between them, a scale, on one side, platinum records, awards, statistics, plays, on the other, tears, prayers, heartfelt praise. Each element weighed differently, not by its quantity, but by its origin. What man calls success, said the spirit, in heaven may be noise. The stands were full, thousands of figures watched in silence. They were the souls of musicians, producers, listeners, critics, even preachers. All who had ever used sound as a tool were there. Some trembled, others smiled confidently, as if they still believed in their own merits. A voice thundered from above, bring forth the records of art. He appeared from the dark side of the amphitheater. He was dressed like a master of ceremonies, with a cape made of burning pentagrams and notes floated around him. He held his book, The Gospel of Sound, in his hands. He opened it dramatically and began reading names. Here are my composers, my performers, My disciples of rhythm, they did not blaspheme, but served me with every chord that exalted the self on the cross. Each name spoken lit a screen above the scales, fragments of their lives, concerts, music videos, lyrics, and interviews played. Everything the world had celebrated was now projected as evidence. I saw sincere tears mingled with arrogance, inspiration with vanity, talent with idolatry. They thought it was just music, said Satan. But it was worship in disguise. On the other